The second source of power is influence within institutions. Britain acting alone does not, obviously, possess the power or legitimacy to directly affect change on the scale required. Acting with others, we can make a difference. I think it's really important to say multilateralism is not a soft option. Just look at Afghanistan, a country that symbolizes our dual goal of protecting our national security and at the same time promoting human rights and sustainable development. Our military forces are deployed as part of NATO operation involving over 30 countries backed by a UN mandate. The military operation is itself backed by a comprehensive approach including EU and UN investment in development and humanitarian assistance. So soldiers and diplomats and aid workers are working side by side across Afghanistan to help give that country a chance of stability, security and prosperity. I think it's right to ask what multilateralism means for our bilateral relationships. My view is that it does not replace the need for bilateral relationship. If we want Britain to be a global hub, we need a strong relationship with the leading global power. The US is our single most important bilateral partnership, yes, because of shared values, but also because of political reality. The US is the world's largest economy, engaged, whether on the Middle East peace process or climate change or international development. It has the greatest capacity to do good of any country in the world. That is why, for example, we welcome the commitment of President Bush to give priority to long-term political negotiation on a two-state solution, side by side with short-term humanitarian and other support for the Palestinian government, led by President Avaaz and Prime Minister Fayyad. Some people are trying to compare our relationship with the US with our position in the EU. Let me tell you my view. The EU is not a bilateral relationship. We are members of the European Union. That membership is an asset in economic terms, where it guarantees open markets and setting common standards where needed. It's an asset in tackling crime, and it needs to be a greater asset in foreign policy, not substituting for nation states, but giving better expression to the common commitments of nation states. That's why we support the proposal to amend the EU treaties so that we have at our disposal a single representative to take forward our common foreign and security policy, where all 27 member states wish to act together and give authority to do so. It just makes sense. All multilateral institutions need a strong sense of purpose. Remember, the EU was founded to tackle a threat that no longer exists, in my view, conflict within Western Europe. If it's to renew its mandate, it needs to find a new raison d'etre, including, I believe, a focus on addressing one of the greatest threats to our future prosperity and security, climate change. Creating an EU as an environmental union is as big a challenge in the 21st century as peace in Europe was in the 1950s. Our long-term challenge, obviously, is to adapt and strengthen other multilateral institutions and networks to renew their mandates, reform the way they work, and adapt more quickly to threats and new opportunities. Now, if it's right that ideas and influence are examples of so-called soft power, then the third source of power, incentives and sanctions, represents harder power, and we should be ready to use them to maximum effect. History suggests that the attraction of becoming members of clubs such as the World Trade Organization, NATO, or more profoundly the EU, is a powerful one. The benefits of free trade or military protection, when linked to states playing by the rules, can incentivize reform and establish norms of behavior. I want to give you an example. I am personally a strong supporter of Turkish accession talks with the EU. The prospect of EU membership has built a very important bridge to a key Muslim country. But it has also, in recent years, helped contribute in that country to the abolition of the death penalty and improved rights of women and minorities. A balanced package of incentives and sanctions are also required to apply pressure. In my view, Iran has every right to be a secure, rich country, but it doesn't have a right to undermine the stability of its neighbours. That's why we're taking a dual-track approach. We're continuing to discuss further sanctions with the group of nations that comprise the E3+3, an international coalition brought together to address the dangers of Iran's nuclear program. In parallel, through the E3+3 process, we're offering a comprehensive package of incentives. I think it's worth just rehearsing briefly what they are. It means reaffirming Iran's right to nuclear energy for peaceful purposes without discrimination and in conformity with Articles 1 and 2 of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, improving Iran's access to the international economy, markets and capital, and support for a new conference to promote dialogue and cooperation on regional security issues. Fourth and finally, there will be cases where direct intervention will be right, and this can take a range of forms: aid convoys, police training of security forces, or deploying peacekeepers. In some areas, however, military intervention will be necessary. It was right in Kosovo in 1999 to deal with the terrible ethnic cleansing going on there. Almost a decade later, I believe it's right that the UN and the African Union are working together to put a strengthened force into Darfur to protect vulnerable citizens there, and right too that under French leadership, the EU is working on deploying a small military force on the Chad-Darfur border. In Iraq, the Prime Minister has made clear that we will fulfill our international obligations and our obligations to the Iraqi people. Our objective is to support a democratically elected government. Our roles are defined by UN resolutions. Our current efforts are directed towards the development of a strong Iraqi security capacity and the political reconciliation that we know must be at the heart of progress. In other words, across those four areas, we have a range of tools at our command. The changing distribution of power in the world means we must be a force for good by virtue not of choosing hard or soft power, but by combining both. In a world of conflict within states, national sovereignty is no answer to complaints about the systematic abuse of human rights. In a world where challenges cut across country borders, we need more than ever to build regional and global institutions that are more effective and legitimate. And in a world where power to destroy is greater, we need both economic incentives and guarantees of security combined with a continued role for hard power interventions. I think this agenda creates big challenges for the organisation I lead, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. Britain, under Gordon Brown's leadership, has the strength to make a difference in the world and thereby make a difference to Britain. My job is to ensure that the FCO makes the most effective contribution to that drive. After 3 weeks in the job, I'm more confident than ever about one thing, that we have the people to make a difference and to be successful. But after 3 weeks, it's also right to share with you the questions I'm asking about how the Foreign Office can make the greatest contribution. First, priorities. Given the levers I've just described, where should the UK concentrate its global effort? Where are we most needed and where can we most affect change? At the moment, the Foreign Office has 10 strategic priorities. All are important. But can any organisation really have 10 priorities? There are important public services amongst those priorities that support British nationals and British business overseas, from our consular and visa services to the UK TI. But policy priorities need rigour and they need clarity. My starter for 10 is that in the coming month we must focus first on helping to tackle the causes and consequences of extremism, radicalisation and conflict. Second, we must shape a sustainable global response to the challenge of climate change and the need for low-carbon economic development around the world. And third, we must build a more effective EU to help build prosperity within its borders and security beyond. But I put those on the table for discussion, not as a new white paper announced today. Second, there's the issue of cooperation across UK government. The Foreign Office, I said on my first day in office, just after I'd been appointed, is in my view a unique global asset. But diplomacy has to be allied to other assets across government, in particular aid, trade, investment, military intervention. How can we improve coordination across the FCO and other departments on particular countries and particular challenges? It's up to us to address that. Third, there's a question for you. How we can engage beyond Whitehall with faith groups, NGOs, businesses and universities.